Hello, my name is Kevin Woodhouse, and my topic for today is to discuss the legitimacy of the Second United Front in the ongoing Chinese Civil War from 1937 to 1945 and its ramifications on the movements of both the nationalist and communist parties during World War II. My reason for choosing this topic was interest in the Second World War and how some historians considered the conflict in China a backwater, whereas others, such as Peter Zorro, look at the war in China as a critical part of the overall conflict. The central theme of my paper is that the nationalists and communists both participated in the Second Front to defeat the Japanese in principle, but in practice, the two parties were still bitter opposition to each other. The reason for this has to do with the differing goals and objectives of each party. The Communist Party and its leaders were committed to the global spread of communism and the communist philosophy, using Stalin's Russia as their example, whereas the nationalists under General Chiang Kai-shek were committed to the nation building of China. My opinions on the conflict were altered by my research in finding out how much influence the various warlords had in the Civil War and ultimately in passing the agreement. For instance, the warlord Zhang Guotao, who was in favor of the agreement, played both sides against the middle. He was supposed to be in the nationalist army, but took Chiang Kai-shek prisoner and might have killed him due to the prodding of the communists. Chiang's life was spared due to the intervention of Joseph Stalin, who believed that Chiang was the only one who was able to keep the country together to fight the Japanese. One of the most interesting findings I made in researching this report was the influence that Stalin and the Russian Communist Party had on both sides. The influence of Russia on both sides also influenced the agreement. This was Chiang who reached out to Stalin for support prior to the U.S. coming into the Pacific War against the Japanese. Both sides had issues, both pro and con, regarding the agreement. Chiang even tried to make deals with the Japanese prior to 1937. This flies in the face of the propaganda that was pushed out by the United States to make Chiang a role model for liberty and freedom in China. It must also be noted that there was a power struggle within the Communist Party at the time that made partnership with the nationalists attractive. The communists were losing the Civil War. The United Front gave them a respite, which allowed them to quell internal problems, which ultimately brought Mao Zedong into control of the party. My conclusions are that the agreement was window dressing to placate the countries both sides were courting for military and monetary support. The nationalists bore the brunt of the Japanese war in conventional combat, while the communists carried out guerrilla war tactics. They meanwhile carried on sporadic skirmishes against each other. There was never a peaceful coexistence. In the end, both Chiang and Mao were both dictators. The pawns in the middle of this war were the Chinese peasants, who looked to them for help and got little from either. The Second Front only helped to bring support from other countries fighting the war. I used primary sources that were involved in the conflict, such as Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong, to account for their actions. Sources such as Winston Churchill spoke to the scale of the war fighting the Japanese. Were also examples of the differences and similarities between the two parties. In using my secondary sources for information, I found that they supported the facts that China was faced with the three-way dictatorship: Japan, the nationalists, and the communists. Regardless of who won the war, the people of China lost. The Second Front did nothing to change that. Thank you for your time in listening to my report.